Well, studio, it's our pleasure to welcome now Rod Hickman. He's a senator who represents District 32. That includes Lauderdale, Noxubee, Kemper, and Winston counties. Serves as the vice chair of the Senate Municipalities Committee. Senator Hickman, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So we received some communications from, I believe, your office that caught our interest. And it had to do with a speech you delivered on February the 6th on the Senate floor, where you addressed the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion. You, we are told, opposed Senate Bill 2515. That's the bill that would end DEI programs in higher ed. Tell us about that.
I think that, as I stated, I think that a lot of things surrounding DEI, just a comment on what it is and what it does. I don't think that DEI does, and if it does, it shouldn't allow people who weren't qualified into spaces that they aren't qualified to be in. I think DEI is a mechanism that allows people from different backgrounds who may not have a connection or someone to open a particular door for them, to give them or to highlight them in their skill set and their ability to bring a different worldview to the table, ultimately bettering our learning environments as well as whatever spaces they're able to walk into. And I think that is what DEI is and what it does. I holistically agree. If it does something different, i.e. allowing unqualified people into spaces, that's not its intent. And really, that's what I wanted to horn in and focus in on, is that most of the time when we talk about DEI, it's a misinterpretation of what it is and what it should do.
As I recall, one of the provisions of the bill simply states that higher ed institutions would not be allowed to recruit or admit students into the various universities just to achieve some sort of composition by race, ethnicity, gender, et cetera, which could result in a situation, if they did that, where maybe a more qualified student would be rejected for admission and would be instead replaced by a less qualified student just based on those physical attributes. That's what I recall as one of the provisions of the bill.
That is a provision of the bill. However, I don't think that any of our universities are using policies like that. Like, we don't have, to my knowledge, none of our universities are turning down hundreds or thousands of people every year.
Right.
Most of the time, if you meet a certain minimum threshold, you're going to be admitted into the university. That's why I think DEI is being used to attract qualified students who are from differing backgrounds. Now, I don't really have a problem with it saying, oh, no, you can't have a quota or you can't make space for a certain group of people who are underqualified. But I think a lot of this and a lot of what's going on around DEI are a lot of smoke and screens. And what it really is, it's giving a chilling effect to the positive aspects of DEI, which are the ones that I want to highlight, and particularly what I'm talking about. And again, that is allowing people in spaces that they ordinarily would not have been invited to, who are indeed qualified to do the job or up to the task or qualified to perform in academic settings.
Okay. So what about some of the other provisions of the bill with respect to hiring university instructors and administrators, where this bill, I guess, would prevent, as you say, quotas from being established or individuals from being hired on the basis other than qualifications, merit, skills, experience, resume, et cetera, CV?
Yeah, and again, I would say I think that everyone. I'm a graduate of the University of Mississippi. I want qualified instructors at the University of Mississippi because when I left both the undergraduate campus and school, I wanted to be qualified to go into the profession that I was going into. I wanted to have the skill set that I needed to take and pass the bar. I wanted to have the skill sets that I needed to practice law. But I think that when it comes to hiring, I think the Supreme Court has long ago declared that quotas and things of that nature are unconstitutional.
Right.
But again, what looking at DEI in hiring situations does is it says we may have 10 people who have all of these equal level qualifications, whereas we're going to look at this thing on a scale, and a different background, a different worldview is only one small thing that we look at that may be something that takes one candidate up over the other candidate. But if there's someone highly qualified, has all of the training, and someone who doesn't have it, I never expect for the university to hire that person in whatever position that they're needing to hire into.
But isn't that all this bill? Doesn't that this bill do that and only that? Just prevents those kinds of practices? What is
No,
it about it that you
in my
object to?
I'm sorry. Yeah, and so I think that it's the chilling effect that the bill has. Again, a lot of times, if you watched, I like to ask questions of what harm are we trying to prevent, and I don't think there's a harm, and that's the reason of the bill. I think it is smoke and screens, and what it's going to do, I think, is going to uh, make qualified candidates who are of other races and other persuasions get away because it don't want to be seen as DEI. There's also this stigma that bills like this have created that DEI candidates are underqualified, and I think it's a whole undertone that I disagree with. But even more than that, it also says that universities have to close down their DEI offices. And basically, these are not necessarily, I mean, the offices do a lot. They work with recruitment and recruiting students and all of that. But even more than that, these offices have services on campus that provide a level, I would say, a level of community and comfort for students such as myself who was on campus. I was trying to think back the other day. I was probably one of the first person I knew in my community or around me that even attended the University of Mississippi. And that created a level of fear for my family because of what they had heard and only what they've seen about the University of Mississippi, which has a pretty, not that great a history as it deals with race relations. And so doing that, I found comfort in having that DEI office and having recruitment and things of that nature I could be involved in and be a part of. So again, I think at some point we all may be on the same page, but I think it is kind of what and how we say it rather than what this bill actually does.
Okay. Well, did you ever feel uncomfortable when you were on campus at the university? I'm a graduate as well.
I can't say that I did, but that's because I had organizations that I were part of from the time I got on campus. And again, I think a part of that was somebody coming to me and talk to me and actually recruiting me that said, hey, it's not what you've heard, it's not what you're seeing. I definitely won't paint the university in a bad light. I had an amazing time there. I'm very thankful for my journey there. But what I'm saying is that the fact of me going and the fact of me remaining there and progressing throughout took a community and those wraparound services.
Interesting. So the DEI department, is that your position then? It was the DEI department at the university that gave you comfort while you were a student, that you were concerned before you got there because of all the stuff you heard about the school?
Now, I can't say that like it was the DEI department, but I think the programs that were hosted, the organization that ran through diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of those things, a part of that absolutely provided comfort. And I think, made my experience ultimately one where since I've gone there, I've been able to encourage many people from my community to go. And I mean, there are students still there now. One of my mentees who worked at my law firm, I encouraged her to go. She's at the university right now. Because that door was open for me and I got those comforts, I'm now able to send people or to have the comfort level to talk to parents and stuff like that and let them know, like, no, it's nothing like what you've seen on TV and things of that nature.
So it's your position then, Senator, that DEI departments and taxpayer investment in staff in these departments is necessary to sort of assuage those fears and overcome those concerns so that we don't have minority students that would be hesitant to attend the university?
And not only that, but provide community and you know uh, understand a worldview for someone who is a minority first time student in college, and to provide just a safe space when things happen there on campus. I can think of numerous reasons why I pulled on those resources, and I mean, I get
Mm.
it. I understand the arguments against it, but I think until you lived uh, necessarily in a society where you are a strong minority, you don't understand the fears and the pressure and just the knowledge that you need. Having not, I'm the first
We got,
person
excuse me,
in my
Senator, we got a
family
break.
to
But if
matriculate.
you can hang around, we can keep talking. If you can hang around, we can keep talking. We got
Okay,
a break
I
right
will.
now. Okay. All right. We got Senator
Sounds
Rod
good.
Hickman. Everyone, it's middays. We've got Senator Rod Hickman on the line with us. Appreciate you hanging around through the break there, Senator. So we were just talking about this bill, and again, that was the communications we received that you opposed this legislation. It was sponsored by Senator Nicole Aiken-Boyd, and it just would prohibit the use of DEI across a myriad of facets in university operation, from hiring to enrollment to content, programs, activities, et cetera. And you were sharing with us that you attended Ole Miss and that you had a positive experience, but you did feel some degree of comfort, I think is the way I heard you describe it, from knowing that there were such resources available.
Absolutely. And knowing that there was community when situations arose. So and again, I do oppose the legislation. I do think a lot of things that the legislation proposes are not necessarily issues that we're seeing here in Mississippi. I want to lift up our higher ed institution. I think they're doing a wonderful job at what they're doing. Um, but there are just the caveat of the whole political conversation around DEI now has, in my opinion, become a dangerous one, particularly for minorities of any kind, whether that be racial, socioeconomic, or gender, or what have you. And on top of that, um, just the premise of it, more so than anything, because like we've discussed, and I think we've talked about, and I think you've pointed out some of those things, that a lot of these things are, one, unconstitutional. Another is that our institutions are not practicing these practices in most cases.
Okay, so your contention is that much of what this bill would prohibit in statute, in code, is not necessary because it's really not happening in Mississippi, in college campuses.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I would just say, a lot of it's just a narrative around that. I think the biggest sticking point for me was the need to, close all diversity, equity, inclusion offices and, that staff. And one of the questions that was asked on the floor that there wasn't really a clear answer to was, does that stop, first generation college student program? Some people say it wouldn't, some people would. And so just with there being a contention around whether what this actually does, I think has a chilling effect on things that are positive for education and the citizens of Mississippi in general.
Well, you've used that term multiple times, a chilling effect. What do you mean exactly? Do you think that, or do you believe that if these DEI departments, organizations were abolished in higher ed, that the university would see its admissions from minority students drop as a result of not having a DEI department, or that there would be some sort of problems that could occur on campus, some sort of conflict between students based on race, ethnicity, gender, which is what this bill uses as its premise. Is that your contention?
Yeah. Yes, I do believe that minority uh, admission rates would drop, not because necessarily the university is doing something nefarious, or because minority students needed uh, any special treatment in admission process, but just because, again, there isn't this arm to wrap around and to do a concentrated effort to recruit minority students. I think that population would drop. And
Okay.
I think that there may be instances on campus where tensions arise to a point where if you had someone working on diversity, equity, inclusion issues and things like that, they can bring down issues better than if they just fester, and before you know it, you have something huge happening on campus. But just to explain, like I use the term chilling effect because I think that universities in some ways will stop doing things that they were ordinarily doing that doesn't necessarily offend this law because they're afraid that this may be seen as diversity, equity, inclusion, and they're going to lose funding, or they're going to be marked or hit for this particular reason. That's what I mean by chilling effect, is that anything that may even look like diversity, equity, inclusion, even though this law doesn't prohibit it, institutions may stop doing or practicing those things. And that's why I use the example of first gen programs. Like I said, it was asked from the floor, and that was kind of a conflict in what the answer was, whether this bill would preclude those things from going forward or not.
So just reading through the bill here, I don't see anything that would prohibit a university from recruiting minority students, or even have minority students or dedicated minority staffers, administration involved in recruiting. I think that it makes sense to recruit all students without any concern for their gender, their race, and their ethnicity. We welcome everybody. I just don't think they should be given preferential treatment, and that's what this bill would do, is just prohibit these institutions from favoring one group over another. In fact, I'd ask you this question and just get your reaction to it. It says that the institution couldn't promote the idea that an individual, by virtue of his or her race, sex, color, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientation, is inherently oppressive to others, whether consciously or unconsciously. Would you have a problem with that, having that be coded into law?
I can't say I necessarily have a problem with that phrase being coded into law. But again, and I will say I am a person that does my best to see both sides. So I try to think through things as much as possible. And I think I've said very early on, I don't disagree with you that if someone is underqualified or not qualified, then they shouldn't be in particular spaces. But I think that there should be a concentrated effort to not a particular person, not saying go out and find us a black male or go out and find us a white female, but there should be a concentrated effort to diversify the spaces that we're in with qualified people. And so that is where, kind of my issue. And I'll say, I've read through the entire bill, and there's not a whole lot of particular sentences and statements that I necessarily take hard issue with. And I think I've been clear. The premise within itself is more so the issue for me.
Okay. Well, not to be argumentative, but you well know that it's the text of the law that matters and not so much the premise. That's what is going to be ruled upon, and what's going to guide any efforts at the institutional level. But one of those provisions of the bill says any effort to select or influence the composition of the faculty or student body with reference to race, sex, color, or ethnicity, apart from ensuring colorblind and sex-neutral admissions and hiring in accordance with state and federal anti-discrimination laws. How do you feel about that? Do you object to that?
No, I do not object to that, and the reason is because I think that sounds like a quota, or that sounds like things that have been previously stated that were unconstitutional. And so again, if I had to make an argument, or if I had to be argumentative, it would be, what's the purpose? If these things are already there and they're already the letter of the law, what's the purpose of over coding this again? And again, I've asked the question, can we point out instances where our universities or higher ed is actually doing this, where they're saving a quota, like we want this many blacks or this many that students, or things of that nature? And I don't know if you'll find that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any specific effort to again influence and manage the composition of the student body. Go ahead, add.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, like I said from the floor in my question, I like the first part of the bill. The first part of the bill deals with setting up basically a task force to see the efficiency of our colleges. And what I said was, if we found that the DEI practice of our colleges and university was harmful, and they were putting unqualified people in spaces and were, saving quotas and things like that, I'd support the rest of the bill. But I think we should have taken a step back and been able to show these are the instances where this is happening, and this is why we need this law to stop this particular thing from happening. I probably maybe could have gotten behind that.
Well, I think it's preemptive in nature, Senator, that sometimes you see things happening elsewhere. Maybe it's not happening within our borders, but you don't want that to take hold within the state, and so you pass legislation just to prevent it from coming into being. I think is the way to look at that. I don't think that's unusual from the perspective of passing laws. I don't think we waited until people were murdered before we decided that murder was a crime, for example.
I don't disagree with
Okay.
that, but I mean, I think we're both Christian people, and murder has been a sin or preemptively a crime even in the natural law before
Okay.
time began. So I don't think we could start there. That's apples to oranges. But I do say if we're having a law where we're saying, hey, our universities need to be studied, and if we're not seeing widespread of this, that committee's supposed to give us a report in a year. My issue was,
Gotcha.
why couldn't we wait to get this report to see what we need to do and how to effectively create a law around it?
We got to go, but we appreciate you joining us, Senator Rod Hickman. We'll talk to
Absolutely.
you again soon. Thank you, sir.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much.